ahead and get started. So good morning and welcome to the Substance Abuse Prevention Program FY16 Budget and Fiscal Information webinar. My name is Ann Cox and I'm the Manager of Substance Abuse Prevention Training and Technical Assistance at Prevention First. On the call and assisting today is Lead Provider Network Specialist Kim Zamboli with Prevention First. Facilitating the webinar this morning is Kim Fernero, who is Bureau Chief of the Bureau of Positive Youth Development with the Illinois Department of Human Services. Also on the call with Kim this morning is Chantel High, who is the Substance Abuse Prevention Program Administrator with the Illinois Department of Human Services. There's a couple of housekeeping items that I'd like to review this morning before we get started, before I turn it over to Kim. You just heard Kim Zamboli mention if you have multiple people in your office listening in on the call and you are the only one registered, please type into the chat box the name of the additional folks who are listening in on the call and the webinar with you this morning so that we can keep accurate attendance for DHS. Once we begin this morning, you're all going to be placed on mute. We have over 50 people on this webinar, and in order to avoid background noise and disruption, and so that everyone can hear Kim's important presentation this morning, we'll be placing you on mute as soon as I get done with the housekeeping items. I'd also like to remind all of you this morning to please not put the call on hold. You will be on mute, so if you need to step away from your desk for a moment, you can do so, and you don't need to worry about anybody hearing any kind of background noise. If you place the call on hold, it's been our experience that we will hear background music or background noise, and that's rather disruptive to the webinar when we have this many people on. So just remember not to put the call on hold. If you have a question this morning for Kim, please type it into the question or chat box, and Kim will address these questions either during the webinar, she'll check periodically to see what questions are out there, or after the webinar. I also want to point out to all of you that there are handouts available for you to download. If you look at the handout box, there are 3 handouts available for you this morning. The fiscal form, the DHS fiscal form that Kim will be doing a live demonstration with this morning is available to you, as well as her PowerPoint presentation, and also the fiscal year 16 Substance Abuse Prevention Program contact form. So you can download those items right from the handout section. In addition, there will be a recorded webinar as well as the budget forms and the PowerPoint that will be located on the Prevention First website effective next week after the last webinar, which is next Tuesday. For those of you that might not be familiar with our website, you simply go to www.prevention.org, click on the Resource tab at the top, click on Substance Abuse Prevention Programs, and scroll to the bottom of the page under IDHS SAPP Guidance and Resources. And you will find those 3 items next week after the last webinar. Again, the recording, the PowerPoint, and the fiscal budget form. We will send out a notice once those things are posted via group site and also via email from DHS. So I'm going to go ahead and turn this over to Kim Fernero to get started on your webinar this morning. And Kim Zamboli, if you'd place everyone on mute, I will do that.
All guests have been muted. You can unmute your line by pressing *6.
Okay, Kim, it's ready for you.
Okay, thank you. I just want to note I heard several more people chime in, so if you can type your name into the chat box to notify us that you have joined the call, that would be very helpful. So good morning and welcome to the webinar addressing important fiscal 2015 and 2016 information. Again, my name is Kim Fernero and I'm the Bureau Chief for Positive Youth Development. Today I will be covering important fiscal information. I highly recommend that you share this information with fiscal representatives, administrative, or program staff that weren't able to join us today. I appreciate your flexibility with the logistics for this meeting, and I hope that you find that by doing these demonstrations and clicking on links that it will better help you understand the important information that's available. I also want to note that I will not be clicking on all of the links during the presentation. However, all have been provided so that you're aware of the various resources. So let's begin. This is an overview of all the information I will be covering during today's webinar. Some of the information is similar to fiscal year 15, but some of it is new for 16. So I highly encourage that you carefully review all of the information shared on the link. I'm highlighting information, but not reviewing all content in the FY16 Community Service Agreement, Program Manual, etc. Again, you're highly encouraged to review all of the content in the documents that will be referenced during today's call or webinar. So I want to start with fiscal year 2015 expenditures. So you may recall that in FY15, your agency was required to submit their June or any revised DDF by mid-July. And this information helps the department determine the amount of the expended by your agency and the payments to be issued. If your agency did not expend all of the FY15 grant funds, the department will deobligate any unexpended grant funds. We are required to deobligate any unexpended funds even if it's just a penny. So, again, you submitted all of this information in mid-July, and we are in the process of finalizing the amount of payments to be issued, and you should be seeing that information, if not now, shortly, regarding any final payments issued. So, if your agency did not expend all the funds, we will be deobligating any unexpended funds. As a concrete example, if your agency was awarded a grant in the amount of $75,000, but through the EDFs reported $73,000, we would be deobligating $2,000. We do some paperwork internally to activate or to generate that paperwork. But what will happen is that your agency will receive an automated email regarding this deobligation. Because of the timing in the fiscal year, it can be a little confusing, and you think that it has something to do with your FY16 grant that was just awarded. So please carefully review this information, or please alert the authorized program representative or their designees about this email, because it is in regard to the last fiscal year and that grant award, and not the current grant award recently awarded in FY16. I also want to let you know that your agency is not required to update the FY15 budget in the CSA. So I want to talk a bit about the FY16 expenditure documentation forms. That form and the instructions can be found on the Bureau's program manual, and the Bureau name is Positive Youth Development. So you'll find the link, and Ann, if you can click on the form. So this is the form we would like you to use. There are many forms out there, and each grant program has something. Some might look similar to this, but this is the form I'm recommending that your agency use. And the reason we're asking you to use this particular form is because it automatically calculates information. And one of the issues that could hold up your payments or processing is when we receive an EDF that there's errors in the amount. That would be a reason that we would need to send it back and have you update it. So I want to briefly review this form. you'll see under the column called title or purpose, these are categories that you'll find in the budget, and these are things that you're reporting on, how your funds were expended for this particular grant program. And you're noting that information in the column called amount claimed. So as you enter information into this column, it will automatically total after you've completed all rows. And again, that eliminates some human error and sometimes related to the final calculation. It's also important to note that the total amount needs to match the information, and Ann is now in the cell listed in this particular table. So that total under amount claim needs to match the amount entered here. When it doesn't match, again, that's cause for error, and we ask you to update and resubmit. So you want to make sure that you're really completing most of this form. The only thing that you really are not required to provide is the document number. If you want to provide information as it relates to the components, that's fine. It's not required as well. But really the only cell that you are not required to complete is document number. All of the other information, your agency name, etc., needs to be completed. I'd also like to have Ann scroll down, and I want to note that you are also required to make sure that the authorized agency official, this is typically, again, the person that receives the signature page or is signing the signature page for your contract, is signing this particular document. You can either have the person sign it or their name can be typed in. You also want to make sure that this is dated. Any of these things, when it's incomplete, will cause us to ask you to resubmit. So it's really important that you accurately complete this form before submitting. Because remember, a delay in submission or a delay in processing due to errors may delay your payment. So I want to also just talk about the timelines for submission. EDFs are submitted on the 15th day of the month for the previous month. So for this fiscal year, the July EDF is due on August 17th, 2015. The 15th falls on a weekend, so this is the first Monday following the weekend. Want to let you know that if you don't have expenditures for a particular month, your agency is still required to submit an EDF. You want to complete the form, and you would enter zeros under the column called amount claimed as well as in the amount. If at any point during the fiscal year you need to update your EDF, you're welcome to do that. You would go ahead and, bills come in maybe later than anticipated. It was something that needed to be claimed in July. So let's say this happened in October. You would go ahead and at any point you can submit updated or revised EDF. You just want to update the report and hit the box revised and resubmit. Next, I'd like to talk about payments. The information that I'm going to be covering regarding your payments is covered in Exhibit C of the FY16 Community Service Agreement. It further outlines the information I'm going to discuss. So I do want to just acknowledge that the budget is still pending, but I just want to give you an idea of the typical payment timeline process so that you have an understanding of how payments are being addressed over the course of the fiscal year, the typical way it's addressed. So payments issued during the first 6 months or so cover the amount that you report, as well as month, because even though you're awarded a contract starting July 1st, we can't issue a payment July 2nd. It just doesn't happen. So your first payment will cover multiple months. So I want to just further illustrate this information. So let's say you're submitting an EDF in the amount of $5,000. Your payment will cover not only what you've reported, but it will also be issued and cover half of that amount. So you reported $5,000. We're awarding half of that amount, which is $2,500, for a total of $7,500. I'm providing this information because if you're tracking the payments issued, the payment amounts will not align with the amount reported in your EDF. So what I highly recommend is that your agency track and monitor the total amount reported as well as the total amount of the payments that you've received from the department. So I've talked about what happens in the first 2 quarters of the fiscal year, and now I want to talk about what happens in the second half or the third and fourth quarters. So the department will start to reconcile your payments with the expenditures. So I want to, again, bring this to life through an example. So let's say that your agency has documented or reported through their EDF $40,000 in expenditures through December. But as I noted, that the department has issued payments, and I'm just, again, making up numbers, in the amount of $50,000. So if you were to submit a report for January in the amount of $2,000, let's say, in February in the amount of $3,000, that totals $5,000. But as noted, your EDF covers $40,000. We've awarded you $50,000. So there's a balance of $10,000, and your EDFs only cover $5,000. So you wouldn't be issued any more payments because you already have that money. And you still have a balance of $5,000. So now let's say in March you submit an EDF for the amount of $7,000. Your agency would be issued a payment of $2,000 because you still had the $5,000 from previous payments issued. Again, this is something that creates a little confusion because you're wondering, why am I not seeing any more payments? Well, after the beginning of the fiscal year, we're, again, bringing into balance. We've issued payments, and your EDF may not have been met that amount, and if they don't meet or exceed that amount, then we would not issue any more payments. So that's just important to note as you're tracking and monitoring this information. So I want to talk about ways that you can check on the status of your payments, because oftentimes this is another area that providers are interested in getting some more information. There's 2 ways that you can check. You can look on the DHS website or the Comptroller's website. So I'm going to ask Ann to click on the DHS website. So this is the home page, and if you look under the tab, she's on For Providers, and she's going to click on Payments. And if you look at the first line, it says Provider Payment Inquiry. And what you'll need in order to check on your payment is your FEIN number for the agency. And then you would enter that information and hit Submit. So this will not only provide information for your grant program, but all of the grants your agency administers funded by the department. This slide just describes what we did. So what's important is because if your agency administers several grant programs, you'll need to know the grant number so that you can see the payments that were issued for that particular grant program. But again, it would provide lots of good information when the warrant was posted, when it was issued, etc. So you should be able to see when payments could be forthcoming. Another way is to look on the Illinois Comptroller's website. So I'm not going to click on this, but if you look under a tab called Financial Inquiries, click on Vendor Payments, and you're going to need, again, your agency's FEIN number. Now they call it the Vendor TIN number. It's the same thing. You want to click on Payments. They're going to ask for some more information, what fiscal year, the time period you're looking for. You enter that information, and it will provide very similar information. I highly recommend that you review the status of your payments on one of these two sites. If you still have questions about your payments, then please get in contact with me as well as the program administrator and outline the nature of the issues. We'll be able to assist you in getting the information you need regarding the status of your payments. Next, I'd like to talk about the FY16 Community Service Agreement. It's also referred to as a contract or a grant. We use these terms interchangeably. The FY16 CSA is signed by the authorized program representative. Typically, this is the executive director, a chief fiscal officer, or their designees. I refer to these staff as administrative staff or leadership staff. What's provided here on this slide is a link to the FY16 CSA. This is what's called a boilerplate, and every contract that's issued by the department has this same information when a contract is issued. And what's nice about this version, there's a clean version, but this version includes the changes from FY15. They've been either deleted or the new content has been added so that you can easily see what's changed from FY15 to FY16. So it's really important that you read all of the contents of the FY16 CSA. But I wanted to draw your attention to some articles that might be of particular importance. So, and another one in particular, so I'm not going to, again, you can read what's listed here. I want to draw your attention to Article 29, which is contracts with other state agencies and other required disclosures, and let you know that Section 29.1 of the CSA asks providers to submit Exhibit G to DHS Office of Contract Administration via mail or email, and it is the same address that you use to submit the signature page. The email address is listed in the CSA. Additionally, under Section 29.4, providers are required to submit a list of the board members or board membership. And again, this information is submitted to the Office of Contract Administration. So when your contract is downloaded, this is something, again, that the authorized program representative or their designee is taken care of. As a program staff member, or for those of you who are in leadership roles, it's really important that these exhibits are shared with program staff as it outlines the scope of the grant program, the deliverables, and the expectations and requirements. So if you haven't received this information, you need to see your authorized program representative for a copy of these exhibits. Shann's Positive Youth Development Program Manual. And I'm going to ask Ann to click on this link. So the manual outlines, again, certain information, requirements associated with the grant. This is where you're going to find the EDF, information about reporting and other important information. So I'm not, again, going to review all the content, but you're highly encouraged to read all sections that pertain to your grant. Again, this is something for the Bureau, and in the Bureau there are several grant programs, so you want to make sure you're reviewing information pertaining to this particular grant program. The official name in the appropriation is Addiction Prevention. The working name is Substance Abuse Prevention, so that's the information that you want to review throughout the document. And Ann is just clicking. You'll see that under billing requirements that Chantel is noted as the contact for substance abuse prevention. You can see her contact information here. And if you continue to scroll down, Ann, you'll see those under E, financial reports. This is where you find that EDF, that expenditure documentation form, and the instructions. Great, thank you. Okay, so next I want to introduce and talk about the FY16 budget narrative template. I'm going to actually before I move on, just want to look quickly. Okay, it looks like there's quite a few questions. Going to probably try to get to these towards the end. I'm looking, it looks like a lot of people also signed in and let us know we were here, so you were here. We appreciate that. Okay, so we have developed a new template. It is, last year's, you may recall, was in a Word document. We put the new one in an Excel spreadsheet. Hopefully that will make it easier to use. It has 8 unique tabs, and there are directions within each tab, so it's really important to review each one. We know that there are limitations and issues, as well as just the overall guidance provided. So hopefully we've addressed many of those issues and questions that you had as you were completing the budget narrative. So I would like to actually have Ann go ahead and pull it up. And as she's doing that, I'll just say a couple of more words. If you experience significant issues with the use of the form, please notify Chantel and myself. And I also want to encourage and say that we really hope that program and fiscal staff will work together to complete the budget. There's certain required trainings and meetings folks are required to participate in, certain supplies that are needed to implement the evidence-based programs. And so it's really important that this information be included in the budget narrative. And so we hope that that's a partnership, even though oftentimes it is the responsibility of fiscal staff. It's really important that they consult with program staff as they're working on it. Okay, so you should see the what's referred to as the cover page, and Ann will be turning over the information to me so that I can walk you through this. So I'm really pleased to introduce this new form. I hope it's user-friendly, as well as inclusive of the information you need to complete this budget narrative. I'm going to share some helpful tips towards the end about how to use Excel. This is not an Excel 101. But just a couple of things I want to bring to your attention. I also want to let you know if you decide to print this form, it will fit on an 8.5 and 11 piece of paper. So hopefully that will make it a little bit more easy to use, or if you need to consult with others or use it as a working document. So at the top of the form, you'll need to insert the grant name. So you can either use SAPP, Substance Abuse Prevention Program. It's really important, though, that you complete this. Several agencies in the Bureau receive multiple grant programs, and so this is going to be helpful for tracking, reviewing, and filing your agency's budget narrative. So please make sure that that is completed. As I noted earlier, there are 8 tabs. They're down here. I'm going to hover over each one. So you can see personnel fringe travel, supplies, equipment, contractual, other, and then a summary. I'm not going to review all of the instructions. Again, encourage you to look at all of them. I do want to highlight a few of them while we're on the call today. So number one is, the first one I'd like to talk about is number 5. So if your agency doesn't allocate funds for certain items, and these are just examples, mileage, health insurance, we want your agency to note this in the justification so that it doesn't appear to be an omission. We also want to know how this won't, so for example with mileage, that wouldn't be a barrier to delivery of services. Number 6 is rounding, and we want you to round up or round down to the nearest dollar. Number 8 is we want you to ensure that the total for each budget category is accurate. This form is unlocked, and there are formulas, but as you're completing it, you may have accidentally altered them, so we need you to check and make sure that they're intact and that the totals are correct. And number 10, we'd like to just make sure that we are having you complete the table below. It includes just important information about your agency and the contact, the prevention staff as well as the fiscal staff for the contact, and that we can notify if we have questions or issues that need to be resolved. 2 more items I want to make sure that I address is please do not use acronyms in the justification. Be sure to spell things out. And finally, we have noted from doing a couple of these webinars that the form, there are a few glitches, so we'll make sure that that is updated before it is posted and sent out again. So be looking and using the new form that will be forthcoming after the last webinar on the 11th, and we apologize for any delay in getting that out, but want to make sure all of the issues are addressed. So I'm going to move on and talk about the first tab, which is personnel. So there are 2 separate tables. One is for full-time staff, and one is for part-time staff. It should be noted that subgrants A, B, and C, that full-time staff are required. Subgrant D, they have the discretion to determine their staffing patterns, which might include part-time staff. If you are working with contractual staff, those contractual staff should be listed under the contractual tab. So what we want to see listed in this particular tab are those staff that are responsible for the delivery of the projected services. Your agency can include supervisors or support staff directly responsible for supervising or assisting the staff delivering direct services. It is at your agency's discretion to determine what staff members should be listed in this section. Just make sure that you're providing a justification for all of those staff. We know that other staff are supporting the grant. They might be working as it relates to the audit, human resources, legal, bookkeeping, etc. But those staff are also assisting other grant programs in the agency and are considered as part of the administrative support. So that information should be presented and under the tabs called contractual or other. So I want to do a quick example and show you how this will work. So now I'm going to show you a position title. So maybe your agency calls it a prevention specialist. You would just use the title for the position. So let's say it's currently filled by John Smith. And John Smith has an annual salary of $38,000. John devotes 100% of his time to this grant, and I would provide a brief justification about that this is the prevention specialist working on, I'll just make it up, sub-grant B, and responsible for the delivery of the services. So let's say that John is supervised by a clinical manager, and her name is Hannah Jones. And let's say that Hannah, her annual salary is $55,000. Hannah devotes 10% of her time to supervision, to reviewing reports, meeting with key stakeholders, and periodically attending coalition meetings. I would indicate that in the justification. But you will see as I click on justification, you will see that it's automatically calculated and shows that $5,500 is allocated for this grant program. You'll see that it's going to automatically total the information as you complete rows in this table. So you'll see that $43,500 has been automatically calculated. So let's say I made a mistake. Not made a mistake. This is a subgrant D, and there's also a assistant prevention worker. And this position is currently vacant. We want to know the rate, the hourly rate. We want to know the number of hours per week that this part-time worker will be employed, as well as the number of weeks. And again, I would provide additional information about what activities and what role this part-time worker will play. You will see that the cost automatically calculated as I entered this information. And as in the previous table, you'll find that the total cost, you don't have to enter it, it will be pre-populated. Additionally, the information from the first table of full-time staff and the part-time will total here, and you see an amount of $57,900. And finally, if we click on the budget narrative summary, you will find that the information from that tab is pre-populated and brought forward to this table that is summarizing all of the different tabs. And right now our overall total is $57,900, but it would increase obviously as we complete the rest of the budget categories. I'm going to move on and talk about fringe. So again, you'll note that there are different instructions in each section, so it's important to review that information. So FICA, workers' compensation, and unemployment insurance are required by law, and you'll see that information in the table. Oops, sorry about that. I want to note that we have identified and listed components of fringe benefits that we typically see. If your agency doesn't offer life insurance, you can either delete the role or update the component as needed for those fringe benefits that are provided. So you're not required to provide this except those that are required by law. The other thing that's important is that some fringe benefits are only made available to certain employees. So fringe benefits for full-time employees might include health insurance, but that benefit isn't made available for part-time staff. So you want to make sure that you're using the information from the previous tab or budget category for the components that it would apply to. So I want to show you how this table works. If I type in 7.65%, that's FICA, and I'm going to apply that to all of my employees, you'll see that, again, it's generating the cost, and I would identify that that FICA has been applied to both the part-time and full-time staff. Sometimes agencies use a percentage for certain benefits, but sometimes they have a flat fee. So I want to use an example using a flat fee, and $10,000 is the flat fee for health insurance at this agency. And as I noted, health insurance, again, it depends on the agency. In this case, is only being made available for the full-time staff. And the full-time staff was a prevention specialist, 100% of his time, and a supervisor, it was 10%. So this is not going to automatically calculate, but the amount would be $11,000. Oops. I must have put in the wrong number here, so let me go back. And what I would explain or perhaps provide is a calculation to show that because John Smith, the prevention specialist, was 100%, then the full $10,000 was allocated. But remember, the clinical manager was 10%. So 10% of her health insurance is also going to be covered, and that would be $1,000. As you're completing each row, the information will automatically calculate. And clicking on the budget narrative, you can see that the fringe was automatically populated and the total has been updated. I need to let you know that the remaining tables do not have these automatic calculations because the rates vary so differently from agency to agency. So, and I'll get into that a bit more in a minute. So, in travel, the first item I want to draw your attention to is we provided the government or the department's travel guidance at this, and here's the website link for it. We have identified the current rates, so the in-state, out-of-state mileage, you should really visit for lodging. It varies from the area of the state. It's important to note that your agency's rate cannot exceed the state rate. So if your agency's per diem rate is $30 and our rate is $28, then the $2 will need to be picked up from another source of funding for that additional $2 issued by your agency. So you can't exceed the state's rates that are currently in place. We want to see information broken out by line item, mileage per diem. It's very difficult to see the rates being used when all of it is grouped or lumped together in one line item. What I want to let you know is that you will have to do some calculations It will not automatically calculate the information by row like it did in the previous section. So let me just do a quick example. So let's say I need to allocate funds for mileage, and I'm going to put this, I'm going to talk about, this is for my local travel in Deer Park. Now the rate that my agency uses is 55 cents per mile, so that's below. So it can exceed, but it can be below. And we know it's very difficult to to know the exact number of miles, but we do want you to put some thought into this. You might think about how many schools you travel to over the course of a year, or the coalition meetings for that local travel. So the next column, we want to know the number of miles or the number of days. So I'm going to talk about that in my community. I travel 60 miles a month, and that would cover a 12-month period. This is for one staff member, and so this is where I have to do the calculation myself, so that would come to $396. And then I would indicate that what this is going to support. This is my coalition meetings and the travel, if I'm doing a youth prevention education program, the travel to the number of schools that I'm attending. I might also include mileage for travel to Bloomington, because I know that the required training I have to attend is going to be in that location. We know that the rate didn't change. It should be the same. So my location of Deer Park and getting to Bloomington is 142 miles one way. So I would want to multiply that times 2 for round trip. I know that the rate we already talked about, and I'm going to make 6 trips. I have to attend a lot of required trainings. This is for one staff. So this would come to $937, and I would indicate the required trainings I'm attending. You will see that as you've completed the rows, it's automatically calculating. We have a separate table for the first time for those who are looking to attend out-of-state conferences or in-state conferences. If you are planning to attend a conference, we want to either have you submit a brochure or provide a link to the website. From the memorandum, you know that CADCA is now discretionary. You can still allocate funds, but it's at your agency's discretion as to the number of staff or coalition members attending. It's not a requirement. So let's say I do want to attend CADCA. Actually, I would probably encourage you to type that out. And I'm going to attend the forum, so I need to make sure that I have airfare to attend. There's going to be 2 of us attending, and that would be $900 because the meeting is in Washington, D.C. And I would want to also say how this is going to support my work. As you complete each row, you'll see that it's going to total up. And then if you've completed the previous table and you have a conference expense, it's going to total again, and that amount will carry forward. So you see it's been updated in that line item, and the total has been updated. All right, so for the first time, we've identified, and we want to see you distinguish between what we're calling direct services and overall agency expenses related to supplies. So direct service supplies might be things that support your coalition meetings, your office supplies, your Perhaps there are some supplies used in the Illinois Youth Survey recruitment for your communication campaigns, for the delivery of mentoring program. And then the agency supplies are those supplies that are used, again, for the overall agency. However, a portion of the expenses are being applied to this grant program. So there are instructions, and we lay that out, trying to give examples. We do want to see alignment between the direct service supplies and the services that you're delivering for your grant program. So if you're doing a life skills education program, then we might see that you're allocating funds for the workbooks that are distributed to students. I want to, again, just, this is something, it's not going to automatically calculate as you're entering information for each row, but it will tally the total. So let's say the item is our binders. This is for my coalition meetings, and I need 25 of them. They cost $2.50 a piece, and so that comes to $62.50. But we don't want you to, again, we want you to round to the nearest dollar. So it would be $63, and I would talk about that I need these binders so that coalition members can easily reference handouts, planning documents, and minutes from previous meetings. You have also a choice, and you don't have to line out pencils, pens. You can group some of those general office supplies together. You are also, some agencies have provided historical information, so they look at, well, what did we spend last year, and that will help us predict the type of allocation we need for this fiscal year. So let's say you do that for office supplies. Then you want to list that information. The rate might be NA then, and the number of items. You want to enter, though, the cost, and in the justification, you need to provide 2 years of historical data. And as you complete, again, you'll see that it's automatically totaling down, and that the information carried forward. Equipment. So equipment is anything that's at or exceeds $500. Anything over that amount requires a quote and should be submitted with your budget narrative. We want a strong justification for the equipment. We also want to know if you've used grant funds in the past to purchase equipment. You are required to maintain inventory lists for equipment, so we want to see that information. And again, you'll need to calculate, but it will pre-populate it as you are completing rows. Contractual. All subcontracts for program services require prior approval. You want to submit unexecuted contracts, and what I mean by unexecuted is that it has not been signed off on by either party, so by your agency or by the organization or individual or company that you're looking to subcontract with. And that would need to be, again, when you're submitting your budget narrative template, you're going to attach these unexecuted subcontracts for review and consideration. If your agency subcontracts with another provider for direct services, then you would want to list this information under this particular part of the table. There wouldn't necessarily be a rate. You would include the cost, the amount that you're going to award to this agency, because maybe that agency serves another county or another community. And what's important to note here is that that particular agency is also required to complete a budget narrative template. So as the fiscal agent, you're completing a budget narrative, but the organization that you're subcontracting with would also need to complete the same form. And it would be submitted with the information as the fiscal agent that you're submitting. So that would be another attachment. If you have contractual staff, the same would be true. We would need to see an unexecuted contract. We would need to know, though, a rate. Is it the amount that you're paying them? Is it an hourly rate? The number of hours that you expect them to deliver? So we would need to see that level of information. Some contractual and other are kind of used because people don't know where to put the administrative and other kinds of costs. It's okay to use either budget category as long as the information is presented. So if you are allocating funds for audit, accounting, bookkeeping, other overall agency expenses, we need to have that broken out. You can no longer say, I'm allocating 20% of the grant funds for this purpose. We need to see a detailed line item of the administrative expenses, and we need to understand your methodology that was used and how it's been applied for this grant program. So we need additional information, and again, encourage you to include that in your justification. As noted in previous sections, you will need to hand tally this information, but it will total down. And then other, again, we've referenced here some of the administrative information. If your agency has a federally approved indirect cost rate or a DHS approved indirect cost rate agreement, we would want to see that included. We don't want your originals, but we do want to see that information submitted with your budget narrative. Again, we want to gain an understanding of how you're applying it. Other things that might fit into other are CADCA registration fee, CADCA membership. I've seen it, again, in contractual or other, and either is fine as long as we have a good understanding of the information. So what's important to note in the final section, which is the summary, you want to, again, check your amounts and make sure they align with the previous categories completed. You also want to make sure that this amount that is the total matches the FY16 CSA grant award amount. So it needs to match, it shouldn't exceed, it shouldn't be below, unless you are telling us that you don't need the full amount of the grant, and then we would need to discuss that, and that's fine. So you want to make sure that it matches or doesn't exceed. Okay. So I want to go back now to the presentation. A little bit about what happens after we've had a chance to review it. We want to review the budget narrative, and that's what we're going to approve first. Oftentimes, the budget narrative does require some revision. So if it was revised, and we asked you to update it a couple of times, you need to make sure that the budget entered into the CSA tracking system is updated and aligns or matches the information in the budget narrative. You will be notified via an email from either your program administrator or another division staff member regarding the approval of your budget narrative. You are required to update the information that you entered into the CSA, and we do ask that you email the program administrator when you have updated this information. The CSA doesn't automatically alert program staff in the department and the bureau and the program when you have altered any information. So if you can please remember that part of it is notifying, that would be Chantal, when it has been updated. There was an extension, and the budget is now due on the 31st of this month. You are entering it, so you are entering the budget into the CSA tracking system. You're submitting a budget narrative to the program administrator and bureau chief, and you want to review the memorandum for that guidance. Now, if you have subcontracts, if you have DHS cost rate, if you want a piece of equipment, those would be other attachments that would need to accompany your budget narrative. You also want to consult that memorandum for the template we want you to use for naming the file, as well as the information that will appear in the subject line. As you can imagine, it's quite difficult to track nearly 200 grants in this particular bureau, and so getting email sent that just say doc or a string of numbers is very challenging for monitoring and tracking all that information. So please use the guidance in terms of naming and when you submit, so that we can easily track and make sure that we file this information accordingly. Any questions that you have, if you have any issues with the form, again, please notify, again, Chantal High, who's the SAPP Program Administrator, and also make sure to include me in the Bureau Chief, Kim. So the guidance. I do want to reference the memorandum just to say that it also includes information that you want to share with other staff. There are probably other staff responsible for fiscal year 15 end of fiscal year reporting or audit. The reason I wanted to reference this information is that sometimes providers will inquire about payments, and we'll find that the EDFs aren't the issue, but if there was a delay or you have not submitted your year-end report, your audit, that could disrupt your payments because you will be placed on the department suspension list. So it's really important that folks are responsible for these tasks are aware of those deadlines. If they can't meet deadlines, they should request waivers, because if you don't, then you risk being placed on the suspension list, and you will not be listed until these documents are submitted. And we can't, again, issue any payments, not for this grant, but for all of the department's grants. I also wanted to make sure that the links that are in the PowerPoint presentation are some of the same links that you'll find in the memorandum and connect to the program manual, the EDFs, and the other resources that have been highlighted. So we're just making sure we're doing this a little bit more consistently going forward, but budget narrative revisions, this really comes to us in all form, shapes, sizes, so we wanted to make sure that we're providing some guidance. It can be found in the program manual, so I just want to highlight some of this information. So if you are transferring funds that exceed 10%, then it does require permission to move. And what's important is that you'll submit a written request that will be sent, again, to the program administrator and the bureau chief. We want to understand the rationale for the change. We want to gain an understanding of the line items that are changing, what's being reduced and why, what's being increased and why is that being increased, as well as any other important information. If you want to go ahead and send, it can be via an email, you can have an attachment, or it can be detailed in the email as long as we have it in writing. And program revisions. Again, I'm not encouraging revisions, but if you do have things that need to be changed, then again, you would reference this level of details in the manual. And again, you want to submit in writing to the program administrator and bureau chief the rationale for the change. We want detailed information regarding the service or the new service or the revision that you're proposing. If needed, you might need to discuss a transition out of a service. If you're ending services at one school and moving to another, it might require a transition. We don't want you to damage any relationships, so we want you to be mindful of that. And any other important information related to the request is welcome. And again, you're sending that to Chantel and myself. All right, so I'll do a quick see if there are any questions, but I just want to say some closing remarks in that we hope that you find this information helpful. We also want your agency to use this information provided and share it with other staff and ensure that it's a part of your resources. We know that agencies undergo transitions. People are promoted, people resign and move on to new positions, people get sick, and it's really important that you think about how this information that was shared during today's webinar can be incorporated into standard operating procedures so that if there is a disruption, that people know, well, these are the program reporting requirements, or this is the end of year reporting, so that no matter who's in place and filling roles, that they have access to this important information. So I really thank you for your participation today, and I'm going to pause here and take a look and see if I can address some of these questions now. Or I do want to say that if I don't get to all of the questions, we will be also sending additional information out after the last webinar and creating an FAQ. It would be posted on Prevention First website as well as sent out via an email. Just give me a minute. Okay, so one question, who is the program administrator to check on payments? That would be contacting Chantel High, and her contact information is listed in the program manual. I would also encourage you to copy me so that if she were out, that I would be able to assist. So another question is, health insurance rates vary based on single, couple, or family coverage. How would we fill in the rate? It seems we would need to put in the total and say one staff. I think that's right. If there are different rates, then you might need to enter information per staff member, because I will use the department. We have one rate that we use, but like you said, in some agencies there's different rates based on the if there's a family, individual. So you would need to complete it then, I guess, by staff. Let's see. mind pulling up the spreadsheet one more time? Can you do that real quick? I want to go back and let's say for other, I neglected to show you just a few things related to Excel. Thank you. So I'm going to, under File, you might want to make sure it's on Normal Review. If you can't see all of the information, that's one item you want to note. If you go to the Home tab, not, okay, do I have control? Let's see, try this again. There are ways, I wanted to just address that you can add rows, you're encouraged to add rows as needed. If you find that when you enter a rate, you see a bunch of number signs, that means that we can't see and you can't see the total number that you entered, you would need to make the column bigger, and you can do that. Or if you need to adjust the height of the row, there are ways that you can do that. Let me see if, thank you. Okay, so let's say I need to insert a row. I would go to this section under Home, Insert Sheet, and it would insert information, additional rows. Under Format, you can auto-fit the height. You can auto-fit the column. So if you're entering information and you're having trouble with that and you're not seeing all of it, then you can do things to extend and make it larger. All right. Thanks, Ann. All right, I'm gonna some of these questions I'm gonna actually respond to either by following up with you one-on-one or address them in the FAQ. And so be on the lookout for that information. I appreciate you outlining. We did have, I would say, a good 10 or 11 questions from the previous one. And I think some of them, and again, even though your agency may not have asked, we want to make sure that we're getting all this information out to you. So please be on the lookout for the FAQ as well. Finally, I do want to say that some people who've started to go into the CSA were experiencing some issues with entering fiscal year 16 information. So we'll also be sending information out about some instructions, directions about how you go about adding budgets so that you can see FY16 information. So again, I thank you for your participation today. Be on the lookout for the resources that will follow, the updated Excel spreadsheet, the FAQ, the information posted. If you need to listen to the recording again or share it with others in your agency, relaying the information to other staff who couldn't participate, that would be greatly appreciated. So thank you for your time and have a great weekend. Bye-bye, everyone.